All right, welcome back, everyone. It is Monday here. It is June 1st. You are watching right now on the CBS 8 app. We want to thank you so much for, again, tuning in, making sure that you are keeping up to date with the very latest headlines, both here in San Diego, California, across the nation, and yes, even across the world. We are, though, going to start. I'm Chris Gros. This is Jack Hull with the state of California. We've got our primary here June 2nd, tomorrow. We know a lot of voters likely remembering that they got their mail-in ballot, now panicking to fill it out, or they are good civic duty following citizens and they've already dropped it off, they've mailed it in, and they've got that I voted sticker waiting to throw that on here tomorrow with the rest of us.
Yeah. I was one of the early voters.
Oh, good.
Had that in. I did the mail, registered in time, and all that. One thing though, I do have a small complaint.
Okay.
You get, if you do it by mail, you get the I voted sticker on the piece of paper in the envelope. It does not stick at all.
Yeah. So it's not the same as
I was
the
going to
ballot.
do it,
Yeah.
and I was going to wear it the day I did it and put it on the show because I think we were talking about something primary related that day, and I just couldn't. And I was like, oh, that,
Yeah.
But it's all good anyways.
I always wait because I generally am going to be doing some live shots in front of either the registrar of voters or at a polling location. So it has become a tradition and a bit of a procrastination tradition to wait until, and then I take my own and my wife's ballots and I drop them off, and then we have the sticker because it comes in the mail-in ballot. But yeah, I always throw it on I wait because I want to wait to wear that sticker till the day of.
Yeah.
Because then I feel like it's sort of like that camaraderie that everybody has where it's just like a little yeah, you voted, I voted, we did our part. So there is still time to vote. We know that Saturday, I believe it was 70 additional voting centers opened up throughout San Diego County. Again, take those ballots, fill them out, and make sure that you drop them off now. Probably not a good idea to throw them in the mailbox now just because the post office has changed how it is that they go ahead and postmark things. But 24 hours remain here in the governor's race. Candidates are making their final pitch to voters. And ahead of this election, California has hit a new milestone. The state has now a record 23.1 million registered voters, the highest in state history. And officials say that eligible Californians who missed the registration deadline can still cast a ballot through same-day voter registration at your local voting center. The way it works, show up, I want to vote, and they say, hey, you registered? You say no. You go ahead, you cast your ballot, fill out your registration, and it's a provisional ballot, meaning it does not count until your registration is complete. So you will literally have your vote counted the least, or excuse me, not the least, the last, but it will not be the least, meaning it is still important. It is still important to the process. Did not mean to switch those two up, but it is just counted a little bit later in the process because they have to finish your registration.
And of course, every vote counts.
Yes.
Even in races that we see are blowouts, it takes a lot of votes to make it a blowout. So we don't want anyone here. We're always going to advocate for people to vote, speak their mind, engage in the democratic process. This election in particular is one of those things where we could see. Of course, we have a jungle primary, as those who watch our show know very well, where it is regardless of party, the top two candidates are the ones that make it to the general election. That could be a Republican and a Democrat. That could be a Democrat and a Democrat. And, we've been talking about this a lot. Earlier, there were substantial fears among California Democrats that it could have been a Republican versus a Republican. So, this is a last effort here in the last 24 hours. I know prior to us coming on the air, we already heard a few political ads. I know it's weird with seeing an election, as contested as this primary was. We forget that there's still the general election. So those ads aren't going away anywhere soon. It's not going to be, am I going to see less? It's just whose ads am I going to see? So.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions I had for our Jenny Hunt, our Friday conversation. Our State Matters political reporter was, Tom Steyer's spent $200 million here in the primary. And if he does make it to the general, I know he's a billionaire. And I know it might seem like a dumb question, but if he's matched up against a Democrat, he's probably going to have to continue to spend at that clip versus if he's going up against a Republican. Again, a lot of the numbers sort of flesh out that, just a Democrat will be able to defeat a Republican, assuming there isn't this massive shift in voter, behavior and so forth. And so that would be an awful lot of money, especially if he's going up against someone with the establishment behind him, like a Javier Becerra. Definitely something to look forward to. Jack, I know there's been some new polls been put out lately. What is the latest one telling us right now?
So this is one, maybe just to do some background context of what we've usually seen in the post-Swalwell California campaign right now. It really was meteoric, the rise of Becerra in this campaign. Almost over the weekend in which we started to see a lot of the Swalwell allegations come out in the fallout that came as a result of that. Very quickly, we saw the establishment basically rally around Becerra, whether those were endorsements from state leaders, from national leaders, senators, congressmen, congresswomen, and for a while it was really just a three-headed race. Even among the Democrats, more, in a way, it was a bit of a four-headed race, even in some polls, a five-headed race. It was really Becerra, Steyer, Hilton, Bianco, and Porter, all really in that 11 to 17 range that consistently fluctuated. But for the most part, it definitely seemed like the top three polling leaders were Becerra, Steyer, and Hilton. And that's still the case now. But it's different in the sense of how many people are undecided. Has support left one Democratic candidate and gone to another one? So let's take the poll, and it's pretty staggering what we've seen here. Of course, we understand this is just a poll. This is in no way indicative of what we are going to see tomorrow and in the days after once it's counted. But Javier Becerra at 28%. That is the highest number, I believe, we've really seen any candidate have.
Any candidate reach at any point.
At this point, yeah.
I don't recall who it is that said this, but essentially that 28 to 30%, that's the type of number that, again, this is generally considered to be like you're moving on to the general. Like that is when you can get close to 30% amongst those that are, again, likely voters, that is essentially considered like that's a very good predictive sign. Now, again, what I would caution is that this has been polls. We have seen the trend go this way towards this three-headed monster, where even now we're seeing the flip-flopping between Steve Hilton and Tom Steyer. I think that's going to be what to watch here.
I agree.
But according to what a lot of the polls have shown, not just Emerson, but even some others, is that Javier Becerra has truly pulled ahead of the pack.
Yeah, and again, I think you make the right question, because let's take a look at these numbers one more time. I'll pull this up, and I might keep it up here for a little bit because there's a couple things I want to discuss on here. But Steyer and Hilton, 1 percentage point, very much from most polls. That is extremely well within the margin of error. So who knows? That could be, if you're assuming like a ±3 margin of error, it could be anywhere of Steyer being perhaps 5 points ahead of Hilton, but it could also be Hilton being 2 or 3 points ahead of Steyer. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that could potentially play out. We remember Katie Porter we could see there was a little bit of a trailing as these polls got released, but for the vast majority of the real meat of this campaign, Katie Porter, her percentage of her support was in the 12, 13, 11% range. Now she's down to 5. So one of the things that we talked about with Jenny was strategic voting by Democratic voters. The idea that understanding the potential implications of spreading out the votes so much, what that could possibly do in such a crowded Democratic field. Most notably, we mentioned there were real concerns. We saw Democratic leadership here in the state of California even advocate for changing the jungle primary system entirely because of these fears of a Republican versus a Republican general election.
Yeah, and even to the point now where I wanted to bring this up just over the weekend or just before the weekend, we heard leading Republican Steve Hilton demand that his cohort in the election, Chad Bianco, the Riverside County Sheriff, drop out, which I thought was a very interesting move because I think even Sheriff Chad Bianco said this on a debate stage. I don't remember which one. That he's like, I think it should be Steve and I in the general, because the prevailing thought is the only way that a Republican wins is that if the options are 2 Republicans versus a Democrat and a Republican. So I thought that was very interesting. But I think for Steve Hilton, he's looking at that poll or internal polling that they have that shows that he's not even in the top 2 now.
Yeah, the calculus has changed entirely.
And now he's lost steam, and now he needs those Bianco supporters to go ahead and get him into that second spot so that he even has a chance in a general. So the sort of jockeying of positioning here. I mean, this is truly maybe going to be a photo finish, to steal a term from horse racing, or as we saw at the Indianapolis 500. But this really does appear that this might be neck and neck here. But for that second spot, I think it's the battle for that second spot that a lot of people right now have been keenly taking note of. But yeah, you mentioned Katie Porter, someone who's polling in the double digits, has now fallen to 5%. Matt Mahan, San Jose mayor. I think that this is someone who there were a lot of people who were very curious about his campaign, in large part because this was a Silicon Valley backed candidate, someone who got into the race later, had some novel ideas as a Democrat, meaning he was someone who was pushing for anti-establishment, but not by going through the left. Tom Steyer is saying he's going to be different than what we're seeing in Sacramento now, but he's suggesting a left of left approach.
Yeah.
Mahan was suggesting a more right of left approach, a bit more moderate, if you will, something that we've seen reflected in his San Jose time.
I think curious is a good term for that, because I think oftentimes we think of the term anti-establishment as further to the left or further to the right of what we would consider mainstream politics at that point. And that's not always the case. It can come from anywhere. It's just that concept of the system that we have right now isn't working, and we need fresh ideas to do whatever it is. I think that there was and maybe it still exists, I think is the real question. I don't necessarily know whether or not it was a failed campaign if you weren't to do it. But I think that there was just a little bit of the political miscalculation, because you hear it from a lot of people that there are these cravings for a little bit of more moderation on certain sides. I've seen a bunch of ads from different nonprofits here, advocating for the independent voter and stuff like that to kind of ditch the two-party system. Not that he isn't, but kind of the idea of maybe this is the time to do it, but because of all of the uncertainty that we saw with this jungle primary and all the candidates in particular, there just wasn't an urge to maybe not necessarily try something new, but to kind of go away from what's already established. You saw the polling. It was very consistent with Becerra, Steyer, Hilton, Bianco, Porter, and there just wasn't, seemed like there was not a appetite to add another person into that equation.
I wonder how much things would have been different if he had gotten in a little earlier, because I do think that media attention, it's very hard. It's a very crowded field, and I'm not saying that an additional 6 months may have been the difference, or however late compared to the other candidates that he entered the race would be. It could just be that people were nervous about. Look, Silicon Valley doesn't have the same reputation across the state. I think that people outside of California maybe have compared to, or what it used to have. I think people in California, when they hear Palantir or Meta, I think that they have different reactions than maybe they used to. And so I think people were weary of potentially someone with Silicon Valley backing. Like that doesn't sound the same as it did back in, let's say, 2008, 2012, right? When this was this budding tech industry that was going to again, be a boom for California and for California residents. I think that now people sort of look at it as an industry controlling politics. And there were a lot of rumors about, is this Mahan? Is this someone who was just in here to siphon votes? Is this, the sort of not Manchurian candidate in the sense of, the book and what that actually means, but just sort of someone to siphon off Democratic voters. Like there were real fears of that. I think it was a true campaign. I think Mayor Matt Mahan had some ideas that he put out there into the ethos, but I think it's just one of those things where time just truly ran against him. Antonio Villaraigosa, I think that this is someone who lost their moment. This was someone who's been in California politics, LA mayor, someone who's run for governor before, but just might be a name that people are too familiar with, that people just, as we go down the list, and for Tony Thurmond, it was again, I think a very crowded field, and it was not someone that we heard an awful lot
There's going
from.
to eventually be
Yeah.
winners and losers. Betty Yee was one of them. She dropped out.
She dropped out.
Much
I was
earlier.
surprised that Tony Thurman stayed in the race, quite frankly, as long as he did. Yeah.
I would say I was too. But one more thing I do want to talk about this poll before we kind of wrap up on this, start doing some previews for what we're going to see tomorrow. The undecided field, and let me make sure it's able to see the someone else in the undecided. We've seen that number somewhat recently be as high as the 20s.
It was the leading candidate at one point.
There have been oftentimes it was the leading candidate. I think we had a poll last week where if you were to rank them, it was Becerra, Steyer, Hilton, undecided, Bianco, Porter. So I mean, as early as 2 weeks ago, it was in fact like the fourth highest candidate. Now we're at 5%. Then, and plus or minus, their margin of error is 3%. So it could be as high as 8% according to this polling. Again, this is not gospel. We're not saying that this is indicative of what we will see in reality. But the idea of not only the strategic voting that we're seeing, but if you're a candidate, like, for example, a Steve Hilton, where are you, or a Tom Steyer for that matter, because you're more likely competing for that second spot. How much of the voter pool really is there anymore, and how effective can that be? Because at that point, when we saw that number at 17, 18, 20%, the idea was this is anyone's race. It is those votes that are going to determine it, and there's no way of knowing how that's going to be divvied up among all of the other candidates. We don't really need to think about that as much because we're already seeing it happen, and according to this poll, it does look like Becerra got a substantial amount of that. Steyer definitely got so much. We didn't see it go to Bianco as much as we saw it go to Hilton. We saw not just those undecided voters, but perhaps Katie Porter voters in particular leave and decide to vote for someone else, whether that's for a change of heart, all of the debates, you got a new perspective, or it was that strategic thing of I perhaps am scared that I am, quote unquote, throwing my vote away if I'm voting for a candidate that clearly is lagging behind in the polls to another candidate.
I know that a lot is made of, there is the informed opinions of those who talk for a living in front of microphones versus what do voters actually know and pay attention to. And I say that to say, I do think the news articles covering the Republican versus Republican chants, I think made their way to a lot of Democratic voters. I think that is the one thing that really pierced through the day-to-day lives, what people were doing. I think the idea that there was a fear amongst Democrats in the state of it being a two Republican ticket, that pierced the veil, so to speak, and that really did get to them in terms of, you saw that in behavior of not as you said, the ballot clutching, right? Like, who do I vote for? I want to make sure that it's someone who is actually going to make it to the primary the general, and not just because I like them, right? Like, and then we saw this very much like funneling of support behind Becerra, Steyer, and Hilton, still with that like sort of same even amount of support, but you saw those two sort of get elevated, and of those other candidates, I truly think that like story, and that was a big, I think the Democratic Party here in the state really put that story front and center, talked about it a lot, especially as those odds continued, to try to get home to voters that they would like to see the voters be aware of what's at stake. I don't know. We'd have to do like an exit polling on that. Like, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that story? But just based on what I'm seeing as time has gone by, to me, that's what it feels like, at least.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that we also saw a bump in enthusiasm on the other side among California Republicans. Whether or not that's something that will ultimately materialize in the end, I think the polling indicates that there is that it's going to be most likely at this moment a Democrat versus Democrat, or versus a Republican. Hilton versus either Steyer or Becerra.
Yeah.
Just what this polling suggests at this point. Again, we want to make sure that we're not predicting anything here. But you saw there was a moment where whether you saw it on social media, whether it was anecdotally to people, there were Republicans through our conversations with Jenny. She was at the California Republican convention here in San Diego. There was an enthusiasm that thought that maybe this is the year 16 years or such of basically supermajorities within California politics by Democrats, some incumbency fatigue perhaps of Newsom. Newsom, of course, survived a recall effort himself. So there was, I think if you're a Democrat, I don't think sometimes you forget that while his polling might seem better now because of what he's done more in the national conversation, there was a time where, he was really faltering among Republicans and Democrats alike. So will that materialize? Who knows? But I do think it's more likely to maybe see somewhat of a more traditional general election, but that's what voters are for.
Yeah.
It's to answer those questions for us. And our job is to preview it and to break it down. But until then, it's everyone's guess. The best thing that you can do right now is just go out and vote.
Yeah. One more headline here before we take a quick break. This is unique because it's the first time that this has ever happened, right, Jack? Where we've got the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is backing two candidates for governor, Democrat Javier Becerra and Republican Steve Hilton. The organization says the rare bipartisan and dual endorsement reflects the unusually large field of candidates in this year's race. The nonpartisan group represents more than 135 Hispanic chambers and business organizations. It says its focus is on economic growth and small business success. So I thought that was unique. Again, this is a nonpartisan group, so I truly think that this speaks to the indecision, or at least the trying to represent the large swath of opinions that are out there. And I have, there are times where you might see, no endorsement versus doing this type of dual endorsement. But I thought this was pretty unique to see that this is something that an organization like the Hispanic Chambers of Commerce would thought that this was worthy. Like, hey, look, if you're going to vote Republican, we endorse Steve Hilton, and if you're going to vote Democrat, we endorse Javier Becerra. Yeah,
I think underscoring the uncertainty is a great way to explain it. Well, Chris, let's wrap it up here. I do want a few things to tease, though. Of course, bless you.
Thank you.
I do want to tease that tomorrow, not just here, but on our broadcast side, it is going to be election. Our morning's going to be a little bit more normal. We'll, of course, be doing previews. We'll have our reporters there. But we're actually going to start our show tomorrow with our political correspondents, Wendy Patrick and Laura Fink. They've came on with us before when we were previewing President Trump's State of the Union address. They're going to be back on tomorrow. We're not only just going to talk about the California governor's primary. We have a whole list here of all different topics that we want to cover, whether that's some of the most paid attention to local races here. We know that we have the what's being dubbed the empty homes tax here in San Diego. That's going to be something that's interesting to see. And of course, national primaries. We Prop 50, redistricting, less competitive races, but competitive races nonetheless are going to be ones that we're keeping our eye on, because in today's day and age and what we expect in the midterms is every seat is going to be critical for both parties as they try to get the balance of power. They're both going to join us all on here and check out, and we're going to be able to really dive into all of that. So make sure you check that out tomorrow.